Hello, we're back. This is, I think, session 9 of the Bartitsu and Antagonistics Forum online classes during this weird isolation phase. Hello, we are good to go for the next hour. We're going to be looking at some of the slightly more advanced Bartitsu techniques with the help of my friend Troy here, who you met last week. He's going to be taking quite a severe pummeling this week, which is great because it means I don't have to. So we'll put him down for the minute, but we'll come back to him a lot later on. So, what are we going to be doing today? Well, I'm going to start off actually a little bit out there. I got a message from one of my students today who sent me a YouTube video, about a 20-minute YouTube video, and said, "You want to watch this? It's basically everything you say, but concise." So I had a little watch of it, and actually it's really good stuff. What it is actually doing is it's taking a lot of different martial arts and describing why a lot of them are actually rubbish for real life situations. Now, the guy presenting it, I think Andrew Walton, who sent it to me, has since put it on our Facebook page, so it's there if you want to go and watch that video. It is very good. The guy comes from a bit more of an MMA slant than I would normally come from. I would normally come from a self-defense point of view, and there are some differences, so I take some issue with some of the things he says, but overall, very good description of why a lot of martial arts is just rubbish. He goes through a lot of stuff about how people are just caught in a mindset. They only ever test what they're doing against other people doing the same thing from the same classes, and nobody has any idea of what they're learning actually works. And it's very true. There's a lot of martial arts like that. There's also a lot of martial arts which are designed for a specific circumstance and are not great outside of that circumstance. Particularly something like Krav Maga, which is a military design thing that involves like stabbing people and eye gouges and lots of stuff that's going to end you in prison if you ever use any of it. So it's not great either. So it's there, it's really worth looking. It kind of specialises down to what we have always said when we're doing Bartitsu, which is you need some punching and kicking, you need some grappling, and from a self-defense point of view, you need some improvised weaponry knowledge. If you have those, that's great. You start off and you learn technique. So you know technique. Let's say that's a better way of putting it. You know technique to start with. You watch somebody else doing it. You understand it. You practice it a few times. What you've then got to do is learn that technique, and that means doing it over and over again until you can do it in your sleep. Okay, that's stage 2. Stage 3, you need to pressure test that, and this is really what that video is having a go at anybody who doesn't do pressure testing, and that is where you try and make your techniques work against a resisting opponent. Okay? Not like a drill where somebody goes, "I'm going to throw this punch at you," but where two of you are trying to bludgeon each other and you've no idea what's coming, and they're trying to beat you and you're trying to beat them. That kind of full-on competitive fighting, sparring, that's where you need to make your techniques work. Until you can make it work in that environment, you kind of have a nice flowery piece of movement and maybe a nice piece of theory, but until you can make it work there, you don't actually know that technique. Okay, and you've got to practice those techniques. You've got to find the ones that work for you. The ones that work for you, great. Make that your martial art style. The things that don't work for you or just don't work generally, get rid of them. Okay, they can make nice display pieces, but they're not useful. And that's really the conclusion he comes to, and it's very much the view that we take with Bartitsu. So I thought I'd open with that, as it's a nice little summary and a plug for another guy who's doing good work investigating about Bartitsu and martial arts. So with that said, we're going to look at 2 areas that actually very much work, and if you watch any MMA, you will see both of the elements we're going to talk about today feature in those events. So the first one we're going to look at is dirty boxing. Okay, now dirty boxing is badly named. Okay, so we're going to go through that and teach you a bit about what dirty boxing is. It's not as horrible and bad as it sounds. We're then going to have a look at some throws and some takedowns, ways of putting your opponent on the mat. Okay, so these are both things that you will use. If you're in the middle of that grappling that we looked at last week, you can throw a punch in. There are ways to do that we're going to look at. That's useful, and you're going to use that. The other thing is you're going to try and put your opponent on the floor. Now, we said we don't want to end up there. We definitely want our opponent down there, because then you can just stomp on their head, stomp on an arm, whatever is appropriate to the circumstance, but you have control of that situation if they're on the ground. So that's the plan to look at today. I realise I've already waffled for about 6 minutes, so I should probably get on with actually doing something. So we will start, as we should have done last week, but I completely forgot, by falling in. So, it's an unarmed class today, so bare hands, we start from attention, and fall in. Okay? And with that said, we're not going to use any proper guards or anything else probably for the rest of the session. Instead, we're going to start looking, as I said, at dirty boxing. Okay? And I'm going to use my my friend here, Troy, to show you how we're going to do some of that. He is actually quite heavy, but he does make a good dance partner. Maybe not. Okay. Right. Possibly I'm the one letting down the side here. Right, so in terms of dirty boxing, what we're looking at is a situation where if I turn Troy's back to you here, we're in a grappling situation, okay? Normally, he'll have on top on one side, and I'll end up on top on the other side. So we'll end up heads next to each other in this kind of situation. And you're both pulling each other around, looking for an advantage, looking to be, it does really look like I'm dancing, looking to find something to use on our opponent, okay? So this is really what we're considering our starting point. Now, whilst we're here, we're going to look at moving on to doing things like leg sweeps and throws and all kinds of things later on. But for now, it's a case of what can I do to hurt him in this situation, okay? Now, partly I want to hurt him because we're in a fight, okay? And that's kind of the point. The other reason I want to hurt him is because it draws his attention away, okay? If I can cause him pain, he will focus on the pain and going, huh, what, why did he hit me? And then I can exploit that to get my throw in. Okay, so a lot of the time this is more, as much a distraction as it is for pain. Okay? Now, we have two sides. As I said, this side, over here, his arm is over the top of mine. I have quite a lot of restriction over how easy it is for me to do things. Now, if I go to the other side, I'm on top. I have this whole range of movement here. So let's start looking at the easy side, what I can do here. Okay? Now, the first thing I can do is try and cause him a bit of distraction rather than pain. Okay? Now, I want to punch him in the head. Okay? This isn't really going to do a lot into the back of his skull. I can't get into the side of his head because mine is in the way. Okay? And if I pull my head back up here, you can bet that hand is coming up underneath my neck and I'm going to lose any advantage I've got. So I need to keep my head here to keep myself safe so I can't punch through it. So what I'm actually going to do is aim for the far side of the head. Here. And I'm going to do it by flicking my fingers more than anything else. So it's an open hand strike, wrapped round and hitting him. So if I turn this way, you should see I'm kind of reaching all the way around and essentially slapping him in the ear. Okay? Now that's not going to be a huge amount of damage, but if we're here and we're grappling and he knows this arm is blocked and I hit him on that side of the head, his attention goes that way and kind of confused. And I can exploit that to then move to something more interesting on my own kind of attack pattern. So, that's technique number one. We have to flick round the head. We get here, we use this freedom of this hand, and we flick round. Okay? The other target area I've got is the back. In particular, this area about here contains the kidneys. Okay? And those will make you move. Okay? You can spot that if you dig around in your own back. You'll find a spot where you suddenly go, whoa! That's your kidneys. Okay? So if I can get this here and deliver a punch into the kidneys, okay, again, it's going to cause pain, it's going to cause distraction, and it's going to allow me to move on to something else. Now this, even if I am relatively big and strong, which I am neither, that is not going to do a vast amount of damage. Okay? We need to generate power, more power than I can generate with just my arm. Okay? So what I want to do in this circumstance is use my drop step. We've talked about this before. I'm actually going to drop both feet, okay? Let's pop him down whilst I discuss this one's a little bit more technical in positioning. So, we're grappling each other here. My double drop set's going to come in. Both feet are going to come up, so I drop into it, okay? Again, I've said this before, I'm not lowering myself down. I'm lifting my feet and letting myself fall. Okay, it takes a fraction of a second. But for that moment, okay, I have become a whole mass of potential energy. So anything I hit with whilst I'm in the air hits with my body weight and gravity, not just the power of my arm. Okay? So I can just drop and swing, and I will do more damage than if I just took the swing on its own. We want to go one step further than that though. Okay? So rather than just taking this swing, we're going to raise the hand up and corkscrew in. Okay? So you can see as elbow comes right the way up, and as I bring the hand down, I turn it. So that I'm definitely going to hit those kidneys, and not only am I going to push into them, I'm going to dig right into them with that drop step. So arm comes up, drop step goes in. Arm comes up, drop step goes in. If I get a target back, here we go. We're back into our grappling position again. If I lift the arm up and then punch here, you're going to see I'm going to connect and then grind into those kidneys. So from here, raise, drop into the kidneys. And you can see even just on the target, there's a lot more crumple happening around here when I do that. I raise and I drop. Okay, so that's two. Flick round, drop into the kidneys are my first two techniques that I'm going to do there. Now, the other thing I want to do is create space, okay? If I want to get away from this, as I've said, I can't just pull back haphazardly, because he will be on me, in at my throat, in at my face, trying to take control of my body in all the ways we're going to talk about later. So the next thing I want to look at is how do I create space? Okay, so if we're grappling, we're kind of body to body and all the rest of it. What I want to do is create some space in around here. Now, if I pull my body back, I can create that space. But I'm then right back on my legs. I have no power, nothing to give. So instead, what I want to do is make them arch up to give me that space so that I have room to work in here. Now, the way I'm going to do that is by causing pain. It's quite a common thing with this. A lot of this kind of comes from a catch-as-can wrestling background, which is, if you look at, a lot of it involves kind of like grinding fingers along the jawbone and things, causing pain to make your opponent compliant. Okay, it's that kind of thing. The one we're actually going to use is purring. So from my grappling position, I'm going to lift this foot up and through. I'll step back so maybe you can see it a bit better. From this grappling position, down the front of the shin. Yeah, you can imagine that's hitting here, grinding right the way down the front of the shin. And I guarantee you, whether they're expecting it or not, every single person's response is, wah! Yeah? Once that knee hits and starts, that foot hits and starts to grind down the front of the shin, that foot will move. And you'll notice I've given all this space here to my opponent. So, we're going to grind down the front of the shin. We've still got hold of them. They've given us space, and we're going to bring that back knee right the way through into the stomach area and the chest. So, grind down, knee up. Okay? So again, if I grab my target, oh, blimmin' heck, he's getting heavier. We're grappling again here. Okay? I'm going to run my foot down the shin. I mean, you can see how easily I found that leg there, okay? Now, he doesn't have nerves, but he would give me space, okay? From there, I can get that knee up and in quite happily. Okay? So that's your next option. Okay? I can either keep him in close and do him damage. I can create space so that I can actually get an attack in. Okay? Now, there's another way. I'm going to switch round. So now he's got my trapped arm on this side for the next one I want to look at. Or is this the next one? No, sorry, back the other way. This way. Sorry. What I want to do here is, again, I want to create space, okay? But this time, what I want to do is, instead of creating space low line here, I want to create space with my whole body. Okay? So I want him hanging on to me, and this hand comes up as high as I can. If I can get the back of the head, great. Shoulders, fine. But what I want to do is step back and pull that head down between us, so I can get my chin on top of it, ideally. Okay? Now what I'm going to do at the same time is, with this hand here, it's hard to explain. So from this position here, I've stepped back and pulled the head down. There's an arm here, but I'm going to go underneath that arm and bring the back of my hand up into their face as I pull them down. Okay? It's kind of hard to do with an opponent who cannot stand up under their own power, but let's give it a try. So from here, I grab the back, I step and pull down. How do I hold this guy up? There we go. From there, the arm comes round, underneath, and up into the face. And you'll notice the head pops straight back up as soon as I make contact. So from here, grab, give space, pull down, wrap underneath, punch the face. Okay, really awkward to do with the dummy, that one, I'm sorry. So we've had causing quick distraction pain, causing more pain, creating low line space, creating high line space. Okay, those are all things I can do with this side where my arm is free. Now I have the problem that my other arm isn't necessarily free. Okay, I'm going to check which order I'm doing these in. Oh no, actually I've got one more to do on that side. Oh, come back up here. This is everybody's favourite technique. Okay? So from here, as I said, I have this situation, I can't hit him in the head because my head's in the way. One option I've got is to get my head out of the way and then take that swing. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to nuzzle my opponent. Okay? This is sometimes by my students referred to as the motorboating technique. What I want to do is get their chin on the top of my head. I'm going to nuzzle in at the neck, down, and pop up underneath their chin so their head is resting on top of mine. I now know exactly where their head is. It's on top of mine. So I can take that swing up and hit relatively easily. So we grab, we're in here, and nuzzle in, down, head up, over the top for that strike. Okay? Again, it's one that works because your opponent is trying to work out why you're trying to stick your face in their boobs, and you're actually just trying to pop their head up so you can get a clean shot. Okay, it works well with people that really won't give you an inch. If you've tried to pull back and they're fighting, if you're scratching here and they're kind of flicking and coming straight back and not giving you any distance, nuzzle into it. If they don't want you to move, keep the contact, position them, and then take your strike. Hopefully that's making some degree of sense. Okay, now, as I said, the other side, let's switch, just trying to move. There's not a good way of showing this. Okay, so he's got my arm trapped on this side. Okay? I want this arm above. From under here, I have no power, I have nothing I can generate. I need to get my hand on top to be able to really cause any form of threat to him. Okay? So, the first thing I'm going to do is use my shoulder to create distance. Okay? So again, we're grappling. His arm is over mine. I'm going to slam that shoulder forwards and pull it straight back again, yeah? If any of you are familiar with deep shoulder action, I'm trying to think, is it Sister Act or something, I'm sure? Anyway, it doesn't matter. What I'm doing, shoulder forward and straight back again. So I'm grabbing. The thing is, their shoulder's being pushed out the way when I do that. As I pull back, I'm creating about 6 inches of space between my shoulder and their shoulder. And that is enough room that I can turn my elbow up and drive my elbow straight up through that gap. Okay? So from here, I shove, pull back, turn the elbow down and drive the elbow straight up the side of my face. Now this might catch their chin or their face. great, okay? That's wonderful. If it doesn't, it's still driving force. They're going to be trying to hold, and it's going to come through here and break that gap, okay? And then you're going to be able to move a bit more. So I'm keeping an eye on the weather. We're outside. I've got a 10% chance of rain. So if I have to quickly get electrical equipment inside, you know what's going on. So from here, we're in our grapple. I'm on this side. I hit, create distance, turn the elbow over, and the elbow comes up here. Yeah? Ready to wrap around, and I'm now on that top position where I can do more. So, shoulder up. Okay? What was the next one I was going to look at? I think, what are we done? We're going to wrap under. Yeah, okay. Going to look at one more in this particular sequence which builds on that idea. So from here I'm going to shoulder barge, pull back, bring my elbow up. Rather than bringing it round this side of the head, I'm going to bring it up, slide it underneath the throat and round to the back of the head and put them into a headlock. Okay? Yeah? So now I have a reasonable amount of control over their head. So from here, shoulder, elbow, wrap. Okay? Now there's several things I want to do here. One is I want to get my hand underneath and find my other hand and lift and pull back. Okay? This is a guillotine choke, and in and of itself can be enough to put somebody out. What I'm looking for, once I've got the hand round, is this bone that I've got that runs down here, which we've argued about. I think this one is the radial, and I'm sure that Michael will correct me in 2 minutes. But this bone here, I want pushing directly into the throat. So that when I grab it with the other hand and pull up, I'm applying that pressure directly across the windpipe. Okay? From there, I'm going to lift and arc my back more. The more I pull my back back, my arms go up, which increases that choke. Okay? Until normally your partner will tap out. Or in a real life fight, they would go limp and you drop them. Because if you don't, they run out of oxygen and die, and that's bad from a self-defense point of view. So what we want to do instead is grab, choke, hold them there until they stop kicking, and let them hit the floor. Okay? However, we are going to go one step further than that. Okay? So I do my shoulder, my elbow comes up, round, and I wrap. Now, this arm is still free and flailing around and hitting me. Okay? So I've got the advantage, sure, but this hand is still coming at me. So what I'm going to do is grab that bicep and shove it through until I can grab it with my other hand. Don't know how visible that is. But there, that's twisted and that arm is out the way. And I now have access to all of this back area for whatever tactics I might want to use. Okay? If I show you that from the other side, see if that makes it any clearer or not. Wrap round, put the arm through and grab with this hand so that I'm actually holding them by their neck and that arm, giving me access to the body. Okay? This is really the start of what we start calling chancery. Okay? So, anyway, okay, here's a little bit of terminology bit which I probably should have thrown in the beginning. Dirty boxing is called dirty boxing because it's outlawed in modern sports boxing. Okay? So you've seen people, when they're boxing and they get tired, they will hang on to each other for a rest almost, okay? Because when they're in that clinch, they're not allowed to hit each other, okay? There's no such rules in pugilism. There's no such rules in a street fight. So if I'm in that position, I can start throwing these dirty boxing techniques, or as they're sometimes called, striking in the clinch. Different martial arts call it different things, but basically it's hitting somebody whilst grappling, okay? Now, a particular form of this that involved controlling the head and then hitting people was called chancery, and it comes from pugilism. So, chancery was actually a legal term. There were several layers of court, and literally you had parliament at the very top. And just below that you had chancery. It was your highest level of court. So the theory was that if you ended up in chancery, if you ended up in that court, you were not going to walk out of there unscathed. Bad things were going to happen to you if you ended up in chancery. And that's where it comes from. Once somebody has your head and control of it, and then starts controlling your arm and starts just pummeling in on you, you might get out of it. There are ways, but you aren't coming out unscathed. You're coming out with damage, bruises, potentially broken ribs. It's going to hurt as soon as you get in Chancery. So that's where that comes from. So that's kind of one option you have there. Shoulder, elbow up, wrap around the neck, reach underneath and choke, or grab the bicep and push it across into this hand, and then you've got that free rein to pummel down on the other side of the guy. Okay? So those are your basic dirty boxing techniques, okay? Distraction, bit of pain, create some space, change the position of the arm there, create some space, hit underneath, or take this into something more early pugilism and Chancery, okay? So those are just some options to play around with. Once you've got into that grappling position, you don't instantly have to go for a throw, okay? The chances are both of you will be looking for that opportunity to get a throw in. That's the point where you want to distract them, keep hitting them. We talked last week about ragging. Once you've got the head, keep them moving. Anything you can do to stop them thinking clearly about the horrible things they wanted to do to you makes it much more likely you can do horrible things to them. So that is your very quick introduction to dirty boxing. Hopefully it made some kind of sense in context with everything else we've spoken about. So what I wanted to do for my ramble today is stick with this idea of words that come from a martial arts background. So kind of phrases and idioms that maybe we don't realise where they actually come from. So this is a bit of a, I want to say entomology, does that sound about right? Study of words, language, something like that. It's got a fancy name. I'm not good at all that kind of stuff. So, there are some really obvious ones, okay? If I talk about a low blow, okay? Just in normal terms, everybody knows it's something a bit sneaky and underhand, okay? That simply comes from boxing terms. If you hit below the belt, so you're aiming for the nads, that was a low blow, and it was an outlawed move. So if you were doing a low blow, you were cheating. Comes into common parlance when people are using it, that was a low blow, okay? It's a cheaty technique to get something done. Okay, we use it all the time. That's where it comes from. It's really obvious, okay? There are other ones. Having somebody on the ropes. Okay, yeah, when somebody is at the point where they're about to give up on something, they're on the ropes. Again, it's really obviously a boxing term. Okay, when somebody is hanging onto the ropes in the middle of a boxing match or bouncing off the ropes and staggering forward again, the other guy is winning. It's almost over. That's the point where they're about to go down. So they're on the ropes, they're losing. And what other ones do we have that are really obvious? Beating somebody to the punch. Yeah? If you've got somebody says something and you go, oh, there's a really clever, witty thing I can say there, and the guy next to you gets there first, he beat you to the punch. Yeah? It's a term we use. Comes from boxing again, because obviously if I beat somebody to the punch or they beat me to the punch, they're winning. They got there quicker. It's really obvious how that one kind of comes from that kind of boxing background. What other ones did I have for really obvious? Beating me to the punch. Oh yeah, blow by blow. Yes, blow by blow. When you talk about a blow by blow account of something, again it comes from boxing, okay? Because there were two types of ways you can commentate. You can go so-and-so won in so many rounds and here's some stats. Or you can literally go, they threw this move, the other person countered with this and threw this move. And that is your blow-by-blow account with much more detail. And I think the first mention of it actually was in a detective novel. Can't remember the name of the book or the author, I'm sorry. But he kind of said, yeah, let's look at this murder as a blow-by-blow account of what happened. Yeah, so that becomes, again, a common term that we use. Right, so those are really obvious ones. What about some less obvious ones? Throwing in the towel. Okay, you probably knew that one was a boxing one. Okay, the way that works is there's three ways in a traditional pugilism fight that you can lose. One of them is if you're knocked out. Okay, if you're down and out for the count, there's another one for you. Not what I was going to talk about, but out for the count. If they count you out and you cannot get back up, you're considered knocked out. You lost the fight. That's option one. Option two, you're staggering around. You're punch drunk. There's another one. You're spotting this. Yeah, you've been hit from there, you're all over the place, and your second, your trainer, the guy in your corner, having somebody in your corner, you spotting all of these, they will throw in the towel. They throw the towel into the ring, and it basically says, we give up. I give up on his behalf, because he is so bashed in the head, he cannot give up on his own front, of his own faculties, so I'm going to do it for him. So throwing in the towel to give something up, to say your team is calling it quits and you're out. Now, interestingly, you also have putting your hat in the ring, or, you know, I'm going to put my hat in for that. So I've seen this applied to jobs. When a job comes up in a company, everybody's going around going, you're thinking of putting your hat in for that one? You know, are you going to go for it? Okay? Again, it comes from a pugilism boxing stance when, back in the days of prize fighting, you'd have the champion would get up on stage and go, right, come and have a go if you think you're hard enough, basically. Now, it was rowdy. If you're kind of going, yes, I would quite like to fight you, nobody's going to pay you any attention. So what happened was, you took your hat off and you lobbed your hat into the ring. The guy would wander around, pick up a hat and go, I'm fighting this guy. So that is throwing your hat in the ring, putting your hat in. Again, it's a terminology that comes from boxing. So we have all of this that comes from it. What else have we got? I mentioned there were 3 ways to lose a fight, okay? You can be knocked out. Your coach or your second can call it for you. The third way is if you fail to come up to scratch. Okay? Which again, term you'd have heard of. You know, not coming up to scratch. You're not good enough. You're not able to do something. And that comes from the line that was drawn in the middle of the ring was called the scratch. And at the start of every round, both people had to come up and put their foot on the scratch. And that was then the start of the fight. If you were unable to come up to scratch, if you couldn't, after your interval between rounds, if you couldn't get up and make it back to the scratch, you forfeited the match. You were clearly unfit to keep going. So that is your other option. So that scratch is also known as a starting point, which is where you get making something from scratch, cooking something from scratch. Again, that's a boxing. It's referring to that kind of scratch in the middle of there, that starting point of the fight. Well, have I got any more? I've got one more. And as time's running out, it is surprisingly appropriate. The term saved by the bell, which was, I believe, a kind of like, I want to say 80s kids sitcom. But other than that, it is also when you're out of time for something and you were... It comes a lot from classes. That's where I always think of it. You're about to be handed a new piece of work, the bell goes and you scarper. You got away with it because of the timing was on your side, yeah? You know, that kind of thing. Again, comes from boxing, yeah? 2 guys are slugging it out and you know you're losing. And you're going to go down and the bell goes. So rather than going down, you get to limp and have a rest and see if you can go again next round. You were saved by the bell. So all of these terms that we have come from a kind of boxing background. Okay, as well as things like hit the deck, hit the mat. There's loads of them, okay? But I just thought I'd highlight a few of those since we were talking about chancery. And it's just something a bit different for me to fill in this kind of rambling slot with. Which, as any of my students will tell you, my rambles get very, very off topic and rambly at times. So that one wasn't too bad overall. Right, so that gives me about 20 minutes to look at how to make your opponent hit the ground. There are essentially 3 throws, 3 types of throws, 4 types of throws. Yeah. Okay, I'm not good at the categorizing of things, but essentially the way I look at things is the first category we're going to look at is what we call takedowns. Okay, these are where we let somebody hit the ground under their own body weight and gravity. So we're not so much throwing them as we're just removing their legs that they were standing on and letting them drop. If you remember back to like week 1 and 2 where we looked at a technique we're going to look at again now, so don't worry about it. We looked at Toshigaki, an outside reap. You move somebody's leg over and they fall over. That's a takedown. The other side of that is you have a throw. And a throw is essentially where is an improvised weapon attack. You are using the earth as an improvised weapon by throwing the other person into the ground. Okay? This is not what you think of from something like judo, where people kind of roll and you throw people nicely. This is much more what like wrestling would be if like the big show wrestling. What's it called? WWE. It used to be WWF, I think, in my day. Where you're kind of landing people on their necks, on their shoulders. You're trying to break things. You're literally lobbing them at the ground in a way that's designed to hurt them so they don't get back up again. We use both of these. Yeah, if you can make somebody hit the ground with a takedown, great, you can control them. You throw somebody, they hit the ground, half the work's done already, even better. There are also, the other types of things is we also have drops are really takedowns, so some of them are called takedowns, some of them are called drops, they're kind of interchangeable. The other important thing is you have what you call sacrifice throws. And they're used a lot, especially in judo or jiu-jitsu, or Brazilian jiu-jitsu, all of those kind of ones where they like to be on the ground. And a sacrifice throw is where you put your opponent on the ground, but you go down with them. Okay? In a way that you can have the advantage when you hit the mat. And that's great if you're okay on the ground. Okay? In Bartitsu, we don't like sacrifice throws. We don't want to be on the ground ourselves. We have some. I'll show you a couple today, maybe one or two. But we don't use them a lot. Ideally, we want the other guy on the ground, and we want to be standing. Okay? I've said it before. In the octagon, or whatever shape ring you want to put in the MMA in, when they're fighting, it's one guy versus one guy on a nice, safe floor. If you're in a pub, it's maybe 3 of you against 4. There could be broken glass, and the floor's sticky, and there's chairs, and you don't want to hit the ground in that circumstance because the floor itself could be hazardous, and you're not fighting one-on-one. So somebody else can be attacking you whilst you're trying to neatly tie up somebody else, okay? So we don't want to go there as a rule of thumb. Anyway, that's enough of me talking. Let's get on with looking at different ways to hurt people. So the first one we're going to look at, as I said, is our Asoto Gaki. So this is Asoto. First of all, I apologize to anybody that speaks Japanese or has studied any Japanese martial arts. My pronunciation is horrible, and I am sorry. So, Asoto Gaki is an outside reap. So what that means is we're actually forcibly going to move the leg out of the way. That's the reap part. And we're going to go on the outside of the leg rather than the inside. So it's an outside reap. So the way we do this one is we go round their leg, and we essentially want to be on our toe between their heels. Let me get my opponent up. Here's my opponent here. And here is a leg, he said optimistically. Okay, so if I'm here, I want to go outside. Yeah, inside would be between them, outside his leg. And my toe wants to go across the line where his heels are. If you imagine a line between his heels, I want my toe on or past that line. So what happens is when I slam my heel down, his leg flips up. So all I need to do is step round to my opponent, flip that leg, and let them collapse in front of me. Yeah, and they're right there. You know, whatever I need to do beyond that point. That is our first technique we're going to look at. So we need to get that, I'll come back closer again, just because of the light. So if I can get that leg round and the toe down, it's that slamming of the heel that very quickly forces my leg from being bent to straight. And it displaces their straight leg here to a bent leg that's flying around all over here. And they've lost their balance. So I can then just guide them down to the ground. Okay? It's a takedown, there's no force, I'm not throwing them at the ground. I'm simply removing their balance and letting them drop. Now, we have an Asoto Gaki. That would allude to the idea of there being an Oichi Gaki, which is an inside reap. And there is indeed. So this is an Oichi rather than an Asoto. So from here, same stance, but rather than going round the outside, I'm going to use the other leg and go in between. Okay, so my leg is in between, and I've curled it round, and I'm again on that heel. When I slam that heel down, that leg goes over. So again, if I can get my opponent to spread their legs a little bit, I step through the center, round, flip, and shove, and my opponent lands on the ground in front of me. So rather than taking that from here, going round the outside, I'm going through the middle to get to that same thing. So that is the 2 reap attacks. And I would say your Asoto Gaki is probably the most commonly used takedown I see in sparring. So it's a technique that's worth learning. There are also reaps. Sorry, no, we've talked about reaps. Sweeps, sorry. Sweeps or garis. I don't like them. They rely too much on timing. What I mean is, I will get in close to my opponent and start shoveling backwards and forwards. And what I'm looking for is that moment where they step forward. Yeah? So, if I am stepping forward, there's a moment where I commit to putting my weight back on this foot, but my foot hasn't solidly landed on the floor. And what I'm trying to do is get that moment as they step, and then kicking that foot out from underneath them as they're about to put weight on it. So as I come down, I've committed to putting the weight on it, my foot goes this way, and my weight continues through, and I hit the deck. It's much the same way as holding a chair, waiting for somebody to sit on it, and at that point they've committed to the sit and can no longer support their own weight. You whip the chair out of the way and they land on the floor. You'll have seen it in like slapstick movies. If you haven't, go and watch more slapstick movies. What's wrong with you? But it's exactly that same kind of technique, but it requires such timing. I've never really managed to get them to work as techniques in and of themselves. But there is an outside and an inside sweep. So really just making you aware of those. The only one I've ever seen work is the Uichigari, and I'll show you why. That works after you've failed to do an Asotogari. Sotogaki, sorry. So I do my Sotogaki around the outside, ready to reap them, to slam my heel down. They spot what I'm doing and flick their foot over the top, back into a nice standing position. Now, I know the minute that I've gone round and I lose contact with their foot because they're bringing it round, I know what they're doing. And I know when that foot will be landing and when their weight will be on it, and I can catch it and kick it out the way as they're landing. Okay, so I'm coming from the inside, really low line, and just kicking it out the way. So that would be my Uichigari. So I start with an Asotogaki. They disengage over the top of my leg. Really, come on, you're not cooperating, man. Over the top, and as they're coming down to put their weight on it, I'm going to catch it with my foot and kick it out the way and let them collapse in front of me. Okay, those are very, very simple ways of taking the opponent down. They are used a lot because they are easy. They don't require much happening on the above, so you can be grabbing somebody, holding them tight, shoving them around, and trying to maneuver the legs to do something clever. Right, the next thing I want to look at, I'm trying to remember which order I had these in, is we have drops. Now these are a bit different in terms of I'm not going to move the legs out the way so much, as I'm going to kind of push them over a bit more. So this next one I'm going to look at is called an Obi Atoshi. It's one of my favourites. Obi just means belt, and Atoshi is a drop. So what I'm going to do here is it's a situation where I'm fighting with my opponent, and for some reason I'm going past them and down. What's the best way of explaining that? So yeah, so if I'm here, what I want to do is get that foot round, but rather than this time going for my Asoto Gaki as we did before, I'm instead going to get my foot round and drop into what we call a horse riding stance. Again, most martial arts have some kind of this. Essentially my feet are about 2 shoulders width apart, and I'm trying to get as much of a right angle in my knees as possible. Okay, and my hand at this point goes around my opponent's waist. Okay, so that's the belt part. All I do then is pull my hand across my knee. Their legs go up and they come over in front of me. Okay, I'll show you that from the back and it will actually make more sense. So I start here, go behind and drop. That comes across, and then I just scissor them between my arm and my leg and just slide them over my knee. Okay? So when I go into my horse stance here, yeah, they're behind me and my hand is round. If I move that across, there's only a minimal amount of space between my leg and my forearm, and their body just slides over the top of that. Okay? It's quite a useful technique. It works really well. Particularly if you're fighting a taller opponent. This is probably why I like it, because I'm short. So when somebody does quite a high punch towards your head, yeah, it's easy enough just to deflect that up just a little bit, step round and drop. Grab the waist, pull them over, and they're right in front of you for whatever you want to do next. So that's your obietoshi. What are we going for next? The twist drop. Teitoshi. Oh, this one's hard work. So, the idea of this one is that if I'm grappling my opponent here, yeah, I really can't throw them behind me. I can move them sideways, I can try and move them back. Okay, they're pushing against me, moving them back is hard. So a lot of the techniques try to move them to the side. What I'm going to do instead in this sun is move my body offline and let them continue through that central line. It's actually two techniques we use this for, slightly different variations. For this one, what I want to do is very rapidly turn from here to here and use the momentum of turning to help drag them over my leg. So to do this, oh, sorry Troy, from here, I'm grappling here, I want to jump across to here. My one leg is trailing out so that they have something to fall over. Now as I jump, I'm still holding on to them here. So I've got this sudden downwards jerk movement as I land. I'm going to use that to pull them over this trailing leg that I've left out in front of me. So from here, I'm going to here. Oh, let's see how this works with Troy. Hopefully it'll make more sense. So if I'm grappling with Troy here, yeah, I'm going to turn and drag him over that trailing leg. And the faster you do it, the more momentum they have. If I'm really, really struggling, because he's a big lad who's taller than I am and weighs more than I do, I can go down to my knee to increase the downwards movement. So from here, I go round, down, and my opponent bounces quite nicely over my knee. Now, this isn't quite a sacrifice throw. I am not on the floor with them, but I am down on one knee. So it's a last resort kind of technique. I can then go after him on the ground, but I'd much rather be back up and fighting. But it is an option if you're dealing with someone who's just bigger and stronger than you are. Oh, right. Hopefully this is making sense. We're going to run over, I think. Since I mentioned it, the other one that we use is called Utamiwaza, which is a great name, and it's a void drop. What we're going to do this time is, rather than twisting our body around, we're just going to step back. So rather than a jump, this is literally a pivot on that back leg. Okay, so we'll go from here, round. Now this only works if they've got forward momentum. So you shove them and they shove you back, and you shove them and they shove you back, and you shove them and they come to shove you, and you step out the way and redirect that force past you. Okay? It's the equivalent of somebody trying to kick down a door. So they kick it, and they kick it, and they've got to kick it a third time, and you open the door and just let them fall through. Okay? That's what we're trying to do here. Now obviously, Troy doesn't come with momentum, so this is going to be complicated. But from here, I would shove, he shoves, we're shoving each other back. I step and turn, and just let that momentum carry him across that way. Now if I do it slowly, he'll probably just stagger off, which might be enough if all I want to do is get past him and run. Okay? The more force I put into it, the more they are likely to fall over, as essentially the top half of their body is moving faster than the bottom half. Now I can turn this one into a sacrifice throw as well. So from here, as they come, I let go and go down with it. So I end up down here. And I am straddled him already in, for those of you who like grappling, I'm already in side guard. Yeah, from here, I'm ready to start looking at some kind of control on this body if I was going to a ground technique. Which is great, as I said, if you want to go that way. We ideally don't want to be on the ground, so we would tend to much more use it as a quick redirect and possibly following up with more striking directly afterwards. But it's worth knowing about that is the Atami Waza. I've gone all out of order now, so let's see what else we've got. Oh, the Heinatoshi. This is one of my favourites as well. This is another sacrifice throw. And there's no way to do this one without it being a sacrifice throw, but I really like it. And it looks great in demos. So what you're looking for here is, if somebody throws, say, a left-handed punch, no, it'll be a right-handed punch coming in on my left-hand side, I can block that, and what I want to do, if their arm is stretched here, is take my arm over the top and wrap it so that their shoulder is essentially in my armpit with them behind me here. Now, obviously this is turning my back on them, they can start grabbing my neck or whatever, so what I normally do is as I come in, fist, elbow. You can get a lovely fist, elbow as you get that wrap in, which keeps them distracted and in pain whilst you finish the technique, which is essentially to push this leg back and drop down, and you end up pinning their arm underneath. Whew. Come on, Troy. So from here, they've punched, I've grabbed, I'm going to come in, strike the face, strike it with the elbow, and I get my wrap here. Yes, I'm holding the arm where I punched it, I've wrapped over the top. I'm going to do this the other way so you can see me when I'm finished, and then from there I fall. I end up here with this arm trapped here, they're behind me, okay? I have this arm here, I can start looking for figure 4 locks, I can start looking for straight arm bars, or I can just use my elbow just to keep them in line whilst I'm working on it. My foot is here as well if I want to try and find groin or stomach or anything here. So I'm in a really good position to start trying to cause some pain once I'm down here, but again I'm on the ground. It's not where we want to be, but that's the Heinatoshi. Boom, boom, grab, and then you literally just throw that shoulder into the ground. Okay, I've got one more. Just seeing how time we're doing. We're going to be alright, we're okay. Which is the Seoinage, which is the shoulder throw, and it's the one everybody hates and nobody ever does in practice because it hurts. This time what I'm going to do is when I've got that arm, rather than going over the top and throwing everything down, I'm going to come underneath and get it on my shoulder, and then use the weight of my, going to bend my legs, essentially pop my ass backwards so that they end up on my back, almost like you're lifting a heavy sack. You don't want to do that just by wrenching your back muscles, okay? So you bend your legs and you kind of pop your ass out to get it on your back, and then you straighten up. We're going to use that same popping motion, but as we do, we're going to pull their arm forward so that they do a nice trajectory through the air and down onto the ground in front of us. So that's a shoulder throw. And you can stop it at various points. So I can start here. Once I've got it, I'm going underneath to here. So I've caught that punch, turned underneath it so they're now on my back. I push my ass out. I've now got them on my back. If they're not really fighting much, I can carry them around like this. This is normally where you get to in demonstrations and normally in class, because nobody likes the rest of it. From here, what I can do, if I just angle this shoulder at the floor, they'll roll off onto the floor. Okay? Right here. I'm still holding that arm. I can start looking at getting arm bars. I can just start kicking them in the ribs, you know, whatever I need to do. But what I can do quite easily from here, I can get underneath, up, twist. It's a nice little quick shoulder throw that puts them on the ground in front of me. But what I want to do is really pop my hips and pull with my hands so they go through a bit more of a trajectory. So they're on my back, I've turned, and then I pop and twist. And as you saw, they go over with a lot more force. Oh. Do that once more from the other side. Well, this would be the other side. So if I was here, catch the punch, underneath, pop and throw, and over they go. And again, they're right here, ready for me to do whatever I need to next. So that's your Seoinage. All of these are different ways of getting my opponent on the ground. We might look at some other time about what you do once you get them there, but from a self-defense point of view, often the answer is run away. Yeah? I was going to say, if anybody wants to learn the best self-defense technique ever, it is go out and do running every day. You will get your fitness up, and you'll be able to run fast, and the other guy won't be able to catch you, and you will survive most fights. There are times, of course, where running's not an option, and then you need everything we're talking about here. But for these ones, different ways. I can either remove their balance and let them fall under their own weight. I can do some kind of drop, dragging them down with my own weight, whether that's dragging them across my knee, throwing my own shoulder at the ground, or I've got full-on throws where I'm kind of turning and throwing the Teitoshi or the Shianagi right the way over the top to create different ways of making my opponent hit the deck. So that gives us about 2 minutes left. So I will start to wrap up there. If anybody does have any questions about anything, as usual, drop me a message on here, message me on a private message. Then my phone number's on the website, ring me, and we can talk stuff through if there's stuff you want to know about. Always happy to talk about martial arts with people. But hopefully what you've done is understood a little bit about where we're coming from when we talk about dirty boxing, being able to strike in that clinch, and some ways of putting your opponent on the mat. Okay? Next week, we're going to be looking at something very different again. We're going to be looking at striking without using your fists or your feet. Everything we've looked at so far striking has been a punch or it's been a kick. So what we're going to look at is we're going to start off looking at open hand techniques. A lot of these come from Chasson, which is a kind of earlier form of savate, so it's the kind of French kickboxing side of things. This is sailors, and it's a lot more about moving people around. It's a lot safer on your hands as well, but I'm going to tell you a lot more about that next week. So that's what we're going to be looking at. We're also then going to be looking at your harder striking as well, your elbows and your knees. Yeah, how can you use those to get some maximum effect to do some damage to your opponent as well? You have these tools at your advantage, and you need to use them. You need to learn how to use them if you're going to use them. The idea eventually is that you have enough tools that in every situation you have a choice of 3 or 4 tools that you know how to use and can make work, and then you can deal with any situation. Having 100 techniques you could use from any situation and not being able to make any of them work is useless. Having one technique that's brilliant is not great because somebody will know how to get around it, and then you've got nothing. You want to have enough in your toolbox, but you still want your toolbox to be really restricted, okay? If you think about your actual toolbox, you've probably got more screwdrivers than you actually need, okay? And in reality, you use the same, probably 4 or 5 of them for every single job. Okay, that's what I'm talking about. You want to find what your 4 or 5 useful techniques are in a situation and learn them. And it's nice to know about the rest, but don't focus on them. But anyway, yeah, so we're going to be looking at open hand strikes, and we're going to be looking at elbows, and we're going to be looking at knees. So it's going to be a bit more brutal and a bit more slappy. A whole half hour of bitch slapping should be fun. So that's what we'll be doing next week. The week after that, I'm not entirely sure whether I'm going to be here or not. Not that I'm going anywhere, it's complicated. I'm not breaking social distancing and running off and having a holiday or anything. I just might not be able to actually put the time aside to do this class. I will know by next week whether that's the case. If I'm not here, I will try and get somebody else to fill this slot, or you get a week off. We'll just see how that goes. I'm trying to think if there's anything else that I need to tell you. I don't think so. That's really kind of where we are at the minute. So I will fall out. And then, as I said, if anybody has any questions or anything, feel free to ask away. We've had a few technical issues. I was hoping to get a bit more interaction with the ramble going earlier, but we've had issues with connections, and Michael has been kind of pinging on and off on the voice channel. I don't even know if he's there at the minute. So it's not been as easy as it would have been for that. So hopefully you'll bear with us for that. And hopefully you're finding Troy a useful addition to these videos. And hopefully you're picking up some information. So we shall fall out. Back to attention stance. And fall out. Okay, it's been great spending an hour with you again. Looking forward to seeing you again next week. Until then, look after yourself. It's a weird and strange world out there, so, you know, follow sensible advice. Don't follow government advice, follow sensible advice. Look after yourself, and above all, be kind to yourself and be kind to other people, okay? I'll catch you next week. Bye.